Imagine a funeral. It's at a nondescript funeral parlor that looks like every other funeral parlor in America. All the seats are filled with a blur of people dressed in black. Sniffles can be heard, and shiny, tear-soaked cheeks dot the room. Soft organ music plays in the background. A casket sits at the front of the room. Flowers surround it. A man steps up to the podium to deliver the eulogy. He's got a hanky in his hand, just in case he gets teary-eyed. He opens his mouth to speak, and pause. Got that picture in your mind? It's pretty much like every funeral you've ever attended or seen on TV, right? Okay, good. You're with me. Now, I want you to imagine that the body in that casket is yours. Welcome to your funeral, baby. The undistinguished people that you imagined in the funeral home should now be morphing into people you know. Who do you see? Who's at your funeral? More insightful question is, who's not at your funeral? Is it a packed house? Or are there only a few people there? Take a look at the person giving your eulogy, the person we left with their mouth open when we paused. Who did they morph into? Let's see what they have to say about you. Unpause. What do you hear? What do you imagine that person saying? This is what we'll be exploring today as Rosanna and I write our eulogy. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 1 of the Relentless Pursuit Podcast, Writing Our Eulogy. Well, it's the kickoff of a new season, and this might seem like an morbid and perhaps interesting choice of our first episode. But after reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, and by reading a bunch of articles, we actually thought that maybe starting at the end is the best place to start. This idea of beginning with the end in mind is based on the principle that all things are created twice. There's a mental or like a first creation and a physical or a second creation to all things. So if you think about it even in terms of planning a vacation, right? In your mind, you're picturing where you want to go, right? What that destination is. And then you kind of backtrack to get you there. You've got this blueprint, this plan. And before you get there, you know, what flight are you taking? What accommodations do you need? What transportation do you need to get from one place to another? And it all kind of comes together for this kind of final, nice, epic vacation, right? Many of us are back to taking vacations this summer, and we're in the midst of planning, and we don't just haphazardly go somewhere. It's this process.
Right.
We're both educators, and like 15 years ago, this like new thing of backward design was like the.
I remember being introduced to that. It was in teacher training school, and we watched one of those lame videos that was probably made in the 80s. It's like, wow, how did you get the students to do that? Oh, I'm glad you asked. I used backward design.
I actually remember that was in an interview, how I got my job at the high school that I taught at for 5 years. They're like, tell us when you create a lesson or you create a unit, like what inspires you? And of course I said backward design, and I saw like their faces light up like I had, come up with the right answer.
And they ring a bell like, bing.
Yes, they're like, you're hired. Here's your contract, signed along the dotted line. But the whole point there is like, where do you want the students to be at the end? Like by the end of this course, by the end of this unit, students will be able to display and do these things. And so when you know what the final destination is, then the weeks ahead of it, in all the ways that you're preparing students and all the lessons you create, like you're building ways to get to that end point. So it's like this whole strategy. And the same is true about our lives. Like when we begin with the end in mind, it's kind of like about this mindset, like you're living intentionally and you're building your life around your values, around your mission, around your vision. But you need that mission and vision to kind of drive everything you do ahead of it. And so when you think about people, right, you think about the end. And so the end would be our eulogy. And it's what will people remember you for, right? What will they say once you're gone? And how will you ensure that the things that they say and the things that they remember you for, right, are the things that you want? And it's kind of about thinking about those things ahead of time and building your life around it.
Yeah. And it does seem like a morbid concept because we don't obviously like to think about death, especially our own. But we really can't accurately forge the kind of life that we want unless we think about like really what do we want to end up with, or how do we want to end up. So first I want to credit the script that I read at the beginning to the Art of Manliness blog, as they explored this topic and kind of scripted that at the beginning. So we'll put a nice link to that post, and they have a great set of additional thoughts around this topic. But it's really kind of challenging, but I think gratifying too. The more that we think about the end, the bitter end, and how just we think of the people. And I think it's interesting that the way that we choose to kind of like manifest our accomplishments in life is by what our survivors say about us. So there might be some other things beyond that we can maybe point towards as well. But we're going to try to envision that today. And I'd like to maybe backwards design this episode a little bit and say, by the end of this episode, each of you listening should, we hope, be inspired to craft maybe not your own eulogy, but to really craft something concrete that helps to guide and inform the daily and yearly decisions that you make.
Yeah, and I've heard that some people use this practice from this book. There's a bunch of the Art of Manliness blog and podcasts. Like there are people who do this every single year, where they actually do this as an exercise to write and then edit, rewrite their eulogy every single day. And this is just a note from this book. So again, it's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It says, if you carefully consider what you wanted to be said of you in the funeral experience, you will find your definition of success. It may be very different from the definition you thought you had in mind. Perhaps fame, achievement, money, or some of the other things we strive for are not even a part of the right wall. When you begin with the end in mind, you gain a different perspective. One man asked another on the death of a mutual friend, how much did he leave? His friend responded, he left it all. So sometimes when we think about what we want to be remembered for, or what we want to create, or what we want to do with our life, we measure it in terms of I want this kind of house, or I want these many kids, or this kind of car, or I want to have, this much invested. It's always dollars. It's always tangible things. But sometimes we need to rethink that definition of what are we really leaving behind? What's the legacy, right? How are we impacting people? How are we creating a force for change in the area around us, or in the people that we know? And so when you think about it in that context, it's a little harder to maybe encapsulate. And so maybe that's why it's a good practice to do, where it's not a dollar amount, it's not a house, it's not a car, it's something more.
Right.
And so I feel like that's kind of the mindset we're in, and that we're pushing each other to kind of reach for, and that we want to push you to reach for too, when it's not just about success or fame.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what Rosanna and I did not do is write down word for word what we hope our eulogy will be. But we did kind of informally craft maybe more of an image of what would be in that eulogy. All right, so first let me ask you, who would be giving your eulogy?
Well, I think I asked you this question when we brought this up as our first episode, that it was going to be this. I said, man, would you give my eulogy? ? And you looked at me and said, of course I would give your eulogy. Who else would give your eulogy?
If I'm alive.
Well, and I'll admit this to you. I don't know if I've admitted this to you. I've admitted this to my mom, is I do have, and maybe everybody has this to some extent, an irrational fear of dying young. Mm-hmm. I think that's my greatest fear. And part of it is because I feel like we have a good thing, you and I. Yeah. We have a great family. We have a good life. And it's not just about being happy. It's I feel fulfilled, and I feel like you are that person for me. And so it scares me to think that I don't get to live that life with you for 80 years. Because to me, it would never be enough. So my mom's bite your tongue. You should never say that, because, what you speak, you put out there and whatever. But, I never.
Okay, so you're saying I'll probably be alive.
Yeah. So you're going to give my eulogy.
All right.
But I said, would you be able to do it?
I always picture doing it like Antony from Julius Caesar.
Are you going to beat your chest and be in a toga? I'm confused. What do you mean?
Yeah, maybe a toga, but I would say, friends, Americans, countrymen and women, country people.
Country people. Of all colors.
Right. But, this was your Rosanna. When comes such another?
Wow.
I would make it very dramatic. And then, but no. But
I don't know. But I picture you a mess, so I don't.
No, I would be, in all seriousness. But I don't know. That's the question when people give eulogies sometimes. It's oh, are they going to cry? Well, I hope so. Just go with it. That's what we're there for.
Yeah. So who do you picture giving your eulogy? Do you picture me or do you picture someone else?
I would say you or Jack.
Wow. Okay.
Right? I mean, it's usually the spouse or the oldest child.
And just knowing his temperament, do you feel like that's something that, I mean, maybe 20 years from now, yes. Now he's 11, so no, obviously not.
You have to do it now.
Yeah.
So that's what I picture. All right, so whoever it may be, what are some of the items you kind of informally imagine being a part of that?
I think I jotted down a very small list, and it's things that I've heard people repeat to me over and over again when they come into our home. And I don't mean this in like a braggy way or anything like that, but it's just like, it's interesting that different people from different parts of my life, from different backgrounds, they say some of similar things. And to me, it's like, it kind of makes me laugh that they say the same thing. But then when I thought about it, I thought like, there must be something to that. One of the things when people come into our home, they say that they always feel welcome here, that it's like a safe place and that they feel welcome. They always say that our home feels like cozy, that people feel comfortable. Like when we ask to get together with people, everybody always wants to come here, which is great. And it doesn't matter. It's like the house we live in now or the one that we lived in before. It's like people want to come to us. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to that, that I'm a friend to all. Certain people are like, I met you in this time and people did not include me or people didn't, but you were nice to me. You know, that it stood out to me, that you're generous. You give what you have and you don't ask for anything in return, that you're thoughtful or that I'm thoughtful and that I generously give kind words. I most recently wrote a card for teacher appreciation for Juliet's kindergarten teacher. Now 3 of our 4 kids had her. She's retiring this year. I wrote her a card. It's teacher appreciation. I wrote everybody a card. But after she received it, she sent me a text on the Seesaw app and said that she read the card out loud to her husband and cried, and that it was on her mantle, and that when her parents were coming over, right, she's like 50-something years old. When her parents were coming over that weekend, she was going to share it with them. Mm-hmm. And I was telling my mom that, and my mom goes, what did you write? And I said, just something from the heart. And so I feel like in those ways I have been gifted to like use my words and to use what I have and our home to like love people. Mm-hmm. And a close friend of mine said something like, the way that you've loved me over the years has changed me in a way that has allowed me to love people in my own version of that. Like seeing you and what you've done for me, like has caused a ripple that now I'm loving people differently than I used to.
Kind of equipped her in a way that she can now.
Right. And it's not exactly the same, but like it spurs her to love people or to try to love people in a certain way. And so then I think of my funeral, and like I said, this is not like in a boastful way. Like I want it to be a sea of people that maybe I don't even know that show up because I loved someone who then loved them, that like changed them.
Oh, okay.
And I think that would be like an ultimate, like, mm-hmm. Yeah, my family would be there, my kids would be there, like people that I work with or whatever, but like that the ripple of my life would mean something more than my followers on Instagram or my wedding coordination business or mm-hmm. my neighborhood, that it's something that can't be seen but is felt and people feel changed by it. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty deep and really sappy, and as I tear up.
Yeah. Are you allowed to tear up thinking about your own funeral?
But wouldn't that be like the best thing in the whole world, that like other people that you don't know, you've influenced their life in some way without even, right? Because it's at that point it's not about me. It's just about me loving who's next to me. And that somehow is so important and so impactful that it then changes more people. Mm-hmm. If we all had like that magnitude of like love and generosity and influence, right? It's not about fame and fortune, but it's something else that like moves people mm-hmm. to be good. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that was really that. Yeah. But that's like kind of what's
pretty
on my
epic.
heart.
Mine is not quite as epic. But yeah, mine. I mean, it's similar, and I think a lot of us maybe feel that way, where we want to have a certain degree of magnitude of impact, and I think that implies like value and a life well lived. So mine is more about I don't know, I kind of have this image of maybe this is more old school, because I'm not quite sure. You can help me maybe how this manifests more in the modern age, but sort of like this. I would say someone who is has a degree of wisdom and like rapport within their society. I'm kind of picturing like this, almost like a small town in a sense, where you have like that one individual who's the go-to, like, hey, like who would have the answer, who would help us in a time of need, or who has wisdom without judgment to share. So
Do you know who I'm picturing right now? Just like every other reference on this podcast.
What?
You want to be the Godfather.
No, I wasn't picturing the Godfather.
That's exactly what I'm picturing. You need something, you come to me.
That's a very sinister twist. Yeah. Why didn't you come to me first? No, I wasn't picturing that, but I suppose that's something that comes to mind. It's like someone who has kind of the know-how and the resources. So I think that's really a stretch for me. I have a lot of like wisdom and knowledge to gain to really get to that point. But I'd even like, just even in terms of money, like just to have resources to be like here I can support someone in a time of need or on a new adventure without really thinking twice about it. And I don't know if it manifests in, it doesn't necessarily, but like in politics, or at least like having a role like to play that is like concretely within the community like that. But kind of having that reputation where it's like, all right, here's a good person who will stand for truth, will stand for the right thing, who we can trust and we know won't be swayed, and has the backbone and the resources to kind of carry us through, whoever us may be.
Well, I think that's a beautiful picture to paint too, right? Someone that people go to, that they rely on, that they trust. So, but I think to get to that point, you have to die at like 80 or 90, right? Can't die today.
Maybe. Actually, that goes with one of my questions as well. We'll get to that too.
Okay.
Age plays a role in one of my questions. All right, so that's informal. And I can imagine, certainly, like, it depends who gives the eulogy as well. Or like a child will have a very different impression, for better or worse, of a parent than would someone who was kind of more peripherally impacted by you.
Agreed. We went to a funeral not that long ago, and a husband and some children spoke on behalf of their mother. And it's hindsight is 20/20. Like if you're a kid who loses a parent young, right? Like what you have to say about your parent, right? It's limiting in the fact that you're a child, and so you can only see what's in front of you. When my grandfather died, I actually gave the eulogy, so I believe I was 21, right around there. And I was asked to give it because my mom was like, there's no way I can do it. Your grandma can't do it. I wasn't the oldest sibling, but my oldest sibling wasn't able to do it, and I did it. And so it's like, what story do you tell? What picture do you paint? How do you want the other people to remember them? And so I remember at a table with pen and paper, kind of crafting that, like, letting little jokes be included, and some of the good and some of the bad and some of the real and some of the raw, to like paint a picture of someone's life, because it's not all just sunshine and rainbows and flowers, but it's, who has this person been over time?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting way to think about your life. It's not just one moment. It's who have you always been?
What I like is eulogies where you can tell like the person is trying to put a positive spin on something. They're like, well, you always knew what this person was thinking, if they were just the type of person to complain or say something negative all the time.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into some of the Q&A we have for one another. Actually, if it's okay, I'm going to answer my own first question.
Go for it.
You touched upon it a little bit, but I think this is maybe the best first thing to explore. All right, so my question is, what is not in the eulogy? So as we're both describing what we want kind of our end product of our life to look like and what people would say about us, certainly one of the things that doesn't come up is like, oh, like, so-and-so had this many dollars in their bank account, or they had this number of cars, or this many square feet in their home, right? We don't quantify our life, at least at the end of it, by those things that we those possessions that we accumulate throughout life.
No, usually it's a numbers game in terms of they had this many children and this many grandchildren. Like these other things that you become proud of like the family you raised and the fact that your name will carry on with, this many grandsons and sons. And so, yeah, it's not a numbers thing, which in like the here and the now, sometimes that's what we're so focused on is how much we're making and how much.
That's a daily focus, right? I mean, and I think about that. I think part of it is just being responsible, right? Is like making sure that we have enough for today and that we're working towards a better tomorrow for ourselves with some of those numbers. But sometimes we let that kind of consume our attention. So the way I see it is like we have numbers, but what really comes out is, I would say, like character and virtue is, I feel like what comes out in the eulogy by the end, or at least what it seems like we're focusing on, like who we are, not what we've accomplished or what we've accumulated.
Well, and I think you focus on that now. You say like the things that keep me up at night are knowing that we have 4 kids, and so we want to be able to.
Our 4 kids keep us up at night.
Literally keep us up at night. Actually, it's they keep us up in the morning, not at night. They actually go to sleep. But right, like being able to pay for college for 4 kids, or that the fact that they'll get married and helping them with a wedding and those things, and so that you're always trying to make sure that like we are being financially responsible for them. But ultimately, it's if you're looking at the end of your life, like who mattered to you? No one should matter to you more than those kids. But it's not just about working so hard that you can financially provide for them, for going to school and all of that. But it's, what lessons are you teaching them? How are you shaping them? Like, who are you inspiring them to be, so that it's when you leave, you're leaving for beautiful human beings who are making the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. But we're carrying on that tradition of positive impact.
Tradition, legacy, yeah. Whatever that might be.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up question to that, and that is like, why is it, do you think, that so much of our time and attention during life is spent on the wrong things? Right? Because, I mean, how many people get to a certain point in their life and they realize, I've been living it all wrong. I've been focusing on the wrong things, and the things that truly matter now, like, I'm going to try to make up for.
Do you think it's a hindsight thing? Like, hindsight's 20/20, right? Like, it's not until you're out of that you realize that you were focused on the wrong thing, right? Like, now, in our 30s, we look back in our 20s and said, in our 20s, we should have done this.
Yeah. Because
it's like, now you know more than you did then. And so, I mean, we ran into someone today who said life is precious. Did they not? Like, literally, the man looked at you and said, life is precious. Enjoy everything that you have now because it could be gone in an instant. Mm-hmm. And we don't live like that. We live like we're going to be here forever. We live like these temporary things are eternal, mm-hmm. and that we're going to have them forever. So we work so hard but what happens? Like, you could light a match and set this place on fire and it's gone.
Yeah.
But that's how we live. We live so focused on these temporary things. We're not investing in these bigger, almost like, what's when you can't see it? I can't think of
the intangibles.
The intangibles is correct. We're so focused on the tangible. And I think that that's a generational thing. I think it's a cultural thing. I think it's a United States thing. Like,
I think it's just being human too. Like, I think of Ebenezer Scrooge, right? He sort of has his moment where he, transforms from the person he was the miser who just accumulated more and more for himself and didn't have any, valuable impact. And then overnight that changes in the Christmas Carol. So, I don't think we'll have, most of us, not that sort of eye-opening experience. So we kind of have to open our own eyes. And instead of the hindsight, beginning with the end in mind, is trying to give yourself hindsight, in advance.
Right. I mean, you can only hope that you don't have these like big moments of crisis in your life that cause you to like reevaluate, because like right at that point, it's too late. When you have like a moment of crisis or something big that like changes your family forever. Right. So I feel like if I've realized anything in this past year, I would agree with the guy who said like life is short. Like, I feel like that for all of us now, like kind of coming out of this last year, now that like things are changing and we're heading in a positive direction and restrictions are lifting and all of that, like there is a sense of urgency and a sense of clarity. Like, for the most part, we've all kind of almost, I'm not going to say lost, because that's very dramatic, because we've been safe for the most part and healthy and okay. But there should be a sense of urgency and clarity, like about who we are, what we're meant to do, like what our days should look like, where we should focus, what parts of normal are worth going back to, that like that whole conversation, like we've had a pause. And if there's not a point of clarity at this point about who we want to be going forward, like I don't know that we're going to get another chance. And so, you know,
the last year helps us maybe recalibrate a little bit. So if we're just like kick off the same things that we were doing before with the same mindset, maybe we missed an opportunity.
Yeah, and I feel like we're different than we were, and parts of the way that we've structured our life are different. And I feel like some people get it and other people's don't, and it's not like a bad thing. It's just like we're kind of moving with a sense of purpose, you know, and it's maybe in a different direction. And it doesn't mean we're not the same people or we want the same things. It just means like we're a little bit more focused in what we want, and what we want is to have an impact, right? And so whatever your platform is, or you know, whatever your mission is or your values are, like it's time to know what those are and to name them and to let everything around that like be following in that course.
Yeah. All right. So do you have any questions?
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of us aspire to have like a big impact. Do you think that that's the goal for everyone? Should we have a big impact? Is it about how big it is or how many people, or is it about like going deep
yes.
with a few?
Size does matter. But I mean, who would say I'd rather have a small impact than a big impact? I don't know if I could honestly say that. You know, I think we all want, you know, a certain degree of magnitude of positive impact with the life that we have. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to have an arena, you know, sold out to, you know, filled with people who want to pay homage to me. I think we all do, selfishly.
No, I don't know that I would want an arena. I mean, in my mind, I'm picturing Salerno's Funeral Chapels right here down on Lake Street. It's like a half a mile from us, right? Traditional Italian place where plenty of people that I know have
been there for many a funeral.
Correct. And, you know, those rooms are not huge, but I think almost a more beautiful testament would be like the room is full and the place is full, like where it's like this unexpected beauty and an unexpected magnitude, that it's more than the average person. But I feel like you get to an arena size, it's like, how well do those people really know you? Like, who's coming, right? They're just coming to kind of see the show or the spectacle. Like, have you gone deep with those people, right? Are these people gonna, after today, are they gonna walk away and forget the things that you said or the things that you did? Whereas if at Salerno's, like, there's the parking is gone and Lake Street is backed up, like, people are gonna say, who's there? Like, is it someone that I know? Like, you know, like that it's this like beautiful, surprising, like full, rich, like meaningful.
I
like
think it should be surprising, but okay. So I would still say the more people genuinely impacted, the better. And I think that's interesting. Just I think humanly speaking, not that we're looking for fame. I think that's different. And maybe more superficial in some senses, but like just it's like how many people can we genuinely you kind of just share this positive life force that we imagine with ourselves? How big of a role could we play beyond our own household? So there's some depth there. Like obviously the people closest with you, especially like our kids, I think we have the most responsibility for, you know, imparting the best of ourselves to. But there's the opportunity for breadth as well. So the depth first, but breadth as well.
Well, and I guess for you, so I was a teacher, you still are a teacher. The amount of kids and parents and faculty that you impact on a yearly basis is like exponentially bigger than like what I do.
That's true. I get to know like 100 people really well on an annual basis, and then the next year 100 more.
Right.
Yeah.
So so maybe the Sears Center in Hoffman Estates is a good spot for you, because you will have really touched the lives of like that many kids, and other educators and professionals and all of that. So like, yeah, I mean, maybe that is a thing, but I guess I just the point I'm making is that we don't need like numbers on social media. We don't need like these flippant followers who aren't going to be changed. It's people who you directly impact. So like when you think about your career or what you're doing or where you spend your time, like, are you doing things that are going to help change people, to help bring them up, to make them better, to teach them, to, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah. All right, so one question that comes to my mind too is like age as well, and maybe I'm overthinking this, but do you reach a certain sort of like peak in your life where at a certain age you kind of have a high degree of resources and of energy, and then does that wane when you get to become a certain age? So by the time your eulogy is actually given, you may have impacted a lot of people, but like 20 years before. Right, because think of how many people that are role models for us or that we knew at a younger age, and then you kind of distantly hear like, oh, so and so passed away. It's like, I really liked that person 20 years ago.
Yeah, but we also show up because I feel like, and maybe this is just like traditionally speaking, there are like very few things in life that are like super important. Like the birth of a child, right? The marriage, so like a marriage of people like joining their lives together, a birth of a child. And then like ultimately, no offense, death, where it's a celebration of like who they were, of what they've done, and the fact that you were in their life or touched by them in some way. And for us, it's very important to show up for a funeral or for a wake or any kind of celebration of life, because we know that that's like ultimately, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that everybody feels like that. I mean, maybe growing up, because I went to like a lot of funerals for family and stuff, it was just a part of like what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But even now we take the kids because it's like, this is a final goodbye. This is a way to commemorate someone's life that it was meaningful and that was important and that it mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about that, it's, it's important to attend those things,
Yeah.
even if it was 20 years ago. Even if it was to someone who, right, was your sophomore English teacher, or if it was, something from a while ago. I think it's just as important.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any additional questions, or should we talk about like a few of our takeaways and challenges?
Why don't we go into takeaways and challenges?
Okay. All right. So this is coming from several resources that I looked at, including the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But they recommend like writing something, and I'll share with you what a few of those somethings can be. But there is you could write your own eulogy, and that might be like a really interesting practice to do, is literally write what it is that if you were to give your own eulogy that you would want to say about you. Actually, a quick aside, because we didn't talk about retirements, but retirement commemorations end up sounding a lot like eulogies. And so I'll just throw careers in there as well, because we do this at the end of every school year. And sure, around this time of year, there's a lot of graduations as well. And so we kind of are using this language, like commemorating the end of something. So even the end of a career, like I think that doesn't necessarily have to be the end of your total life, but it could be the end of your professional life, right? So you can kind of, make different microcosms of different aspects of your life and kind of do the same thing. What do you want people to say about you at your retirement party? So I'll throw that in there, but you could write that specifically. You could write, some people do this more like forward looking. So they write a personal mission statement, or they write, I've heard the term, a personal constitution, which is, like a founding document for a country or for an organization, which is a little bit different than a mission statement. Some people do this as a family mission statement. So instead of doing that personally, they do it collectively. And then there is even like these personal affirmations as well, where, I first read about this a while ago and I thought it was kind of silly, until you have like Napoleon Hill and Tony Robbins also like just saying like, just write down who you are in the best most glowing terms of really who you want to be. And the more you repeat that to yourself, the more likely that is to manifest. So there's a lot of different kinds of things that could be written, but I think the point is to write something. And so that, for me and you, I think is going to be our first project. And we may or may not post these publicly, but I think it would be kind of cool just to take time for ourselves over the next few days to write whatever we see fitting for ourselves.
Yeah, I've designed family mission statements for people, personal mission statements and constitutions. When I did like graphic design work and sold it on Etsy, people would say like, this is what I want. I want you to graphically and artistically do this with like text and certain colors and whatever. And I would do those for people. And it was interesting to see like what was important to them as a family, and then like what were their like driving missions and visions to accomplish together. And they have them hung in their house, and it's something they address, with their kids, and it's part of who they are. So it's like, this is who we say we are, so this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I like that idea of that, like just posting it somewhere where it's just visually accessible within the household.
And even part of the journal that I do, it's called the 5-minute journal. You're talking about like Tony Robbins and stuff. It does. One of the things that I write every day is a personal affirmation about myself. And so some days it's like I kind of sit there for a while because like every day it's like you have a chance to write an affirmation about yourself. And so write one truth about yourself every single day. And so some days it's very easy and other days it's a little bit harder, but it does get you to stop in the morning and reflect about like, this is who I am. And it's interesting that changes my outlook when I write that in the morning of how I carry myself throughout the day. It's like you're holding yourself accountable through the words that you write to be who you say you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that for myself on several occasions, and I'd like to do it more regularly too. So that may be something I do, even as an aside to what we're talking about specifically now. I think going along with that, other takeaways are just the habits that go along with that. So like be specific with what you write. It's very easy to be vague. And I feel like what you and I were describing earlier in the show, where it was maybe a little bit more vague. So we can, I think, even add more concreteness to our language and to like what we see, but also keeping it brief, keeping it straightforward. Like let's not get lost in the clouds here. It's difficult to act on something that doesn't really make sense realistically. It also needs to be reviewed regularly. It needs to be applied regularly and even amended, because I think who we are or who we want to be like gradually evolves as we grow. So don't be afraid to, look back on something you wrote a year or 5 years ago and be like, you know what, I feel a little bit differently about this now. Let me tweak this.
Yeah. Well, and I think some questions that might guide that, right? As you're trying to decide like what would make a successful life, or where do I want to be at the end, is like, who matters most to you? I think you have to know, right? Everybody can't matter the same amount. Like, so who's the most important? What do people appreciate most about you? So being able to define that for yourself, finding the best parts of you and defining what are those best parts. What did your life, or what do you want your life to mean to other people? So what do you want them to see? What impact do you have? And what will they lose in your passing? Like, what is uniquely you that once you're gone, someone else doesn't necessarily replicate or play the same role? So what makes you different than someone else? So those are just some questions to guide as maybe you're creating some of those statements or where you want to be at the end.
Yeah. I heard this tidbit some time ago, and that is that they would take people just starting their careers, and they would have them try to draw a picture, or you can even, like, certain computer applications can help age you so that you basically can see what you look like at the age of retirement. People who experienced that were more likely to then engage in financially responsible choices that prepared them for when they actually are at that age. So I share that just because I think that's the same kind of concept, and kind of wanted to end on that note, that the more we realistically picture our future selves and how we love our future selves, we want to care for our future selves, but that begins now. How do we really take the steps, those tangible things that we can do, and transform ourselves into the person that we imagine being down the road? So the more we picture that at the end, then the more likely that becomes part of who we are beginning now.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary picture to paint. As I went to lunch with friends this weekend, we met in elementary school, and we went out to lunch to celebrate one of the girls having her 4th. So it was a great excuse to get together. And so then I saw the picture that we took of all of us, which I thought looked great. And then I went back and found pictures of all of us with each other at our weddings, because we were all at each other's weddings. And just to see, like, I didn't think I was old or aging.
Oh, boy.
And then I saw like a picture from our wedding. We were 23. So 23. And we took a picture this weekend. We're all 38. It's, 15 years later. And to see like how much older we actually are and what we've accomplished and what we achieved. But it's now like taking that same snapshot in my mind of us same girls, right? 15 years from now and 30 years from now. You don't often picture yourself there. But that changes. Like, where will I be then? And what do I want to have accomplished, but not just in numerically speaking? But what have I done with my life since then,
Yeah. All right, well, we always look forward to hearing back from any of you who are listening and have some thoughts to share with us. So please share with us what your takeaways are. If you have not yet left a review and a 5-star rating on iTunes, we invite you to do that as well. And we thank you for joining us as we kick off Season 4, and we're looking forward to many more episodes over these summer months to share with you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you are encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are 2 great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursuing what matters.